Hi, it's John from Crafts by John UK. Today we're going to be making this cute card. It's basically a floral card with a neutral background, and then we have this interesting necklace of beautiful gems hanging down. I've created the background myself using a mixture of distress oxides and spritzing, and I'll show you how to make that. I'll also show you how I've decoupaged the flowers, so I've actually lifted them up slightly from the page, and then I've obviously coloured those, and I coloured them this time using my Arteza watercolour pens. All the gems you can see have glossy accents, and there's a simple sentiment that says hope your birthday is as special as you are. So it's quite a subtle card, nice colours, different berries and things, and I've done some simple highlighting. If you want to see how it's done, stay tuned. Okay, let's get started. I've double speeded this because it's quite a long video, but basically you can see the actual stamp is a 6-inch square. So I've cut a piece of 6-inch square watercolor cardstock. This is my normal cardstock that I use. It's about a 300 GSM. You need something that's going to take a bit of water. So I've got two different colored distress oxides there, or distress inks, sorry. And you can see I'm just laying down the blue first of all. I'm doing this on my glass craft mat, so apologies for the reflection from my lamp, but you can see the very first layer I'm doing is a very simple layer. It's just to get some background colour. So I've done one layer, I've spritzed it, I've smooshed it, I've then dried it as well. The important thing when using distress inks or distress oxides is drying between the layers. So I've dried that layer off, and you can see the second layer has given me a little bit of depth of colour, which is kind of what I'm looking for, but I do want it to be quite subtle. So that's my first layer, that's the blue, which was a really quite light blue. I'm then going to go in with the green, but instead of smooshing it directly, I've actually put it onto my glass mat, and then you can see I've spritzed it and then taken it off with a piece of acetate. Now often you smoosh straight onto the acetate, spritz on the acetate and take it off. Doing it this way, you get a little bit less ink and it's a little bit more controllable, I find. I wanted quite a subtle look with this card, so that's why I did it the way I did it. You can see there I'm taking the time to dry everything, dry the front, dry the back, keep drying it between different smooshing sessions, and that way you kind of control how much you get. I decided this was enough for what I wanted. So I'm then putting that into my stamping platform. Now the stamp itself is brand new, I've never used it. It was a gift to me from my friend Kate, and I'm basically just sort of playing around really with where that's going to go and how that's going to look. The actual stamp is a little bit bigger than the paper, so I kind of thought, right, I need to position this somehow in my stamping platform. So I've kind of put it floating at the moment. Also, because it's 6-inch square, I've got nowhere I can actually stick the magnets. I've also given it a clean before I've used it, and just checking kind of how much air is trapped underneath the stamp, because it's quite a big one. But apologies, I had to move my stamping platform out of the way because it kept hitting the filming light above, you can see. So I'm kind of just messing around here with the positioning, just trying to get it in the right place. It was a little bit tricky. I decided I was going to stamp this whole thing in blue ink, so you can see there I'm using a VersaFine clear ink there, which is not my normal stamping ink, but I decided I wanted like a mid blue, not a really dark blue. So I'm inking up the whole thing. I've got it in roughly the right place, and I'm just moving it out of the way there just so I don't keep banging into the light and annoying the hell out of you. So I'm using my little block to press down and just make sure I get a good image. So opening that up, you can see that's starting to look nice. So what I'll do now is I will cover that in clear ultrafine emboss. This is the Wow product, and I'll just give that a good heat to cement everything basically. Because we're going to be colouring bits of this in, it's just good to heat emboss it. It just sort of sets it, it gives it a nice glossy finish, but also more importantly just gives you a little border to colour up to, which is, I find, really useful when colouring. So I'm just giving that whole thing a nice heat, and I wish it was as quick as it is in this video when you actually do it for real, but hey. And then I'm heating the back as well. Important piece when you're embossing with heat, you have to make sure you cover everywhere. So now what I'm also going to do is put a second piece in, and I'm just going to stamp the flowers again. This is because obviously I'm going to cut that out, colour it, and then use it as a raised surface just to kind of bring those flowers to life a little bit. So similarly, I'm going to heat emboss that as well, so I'm covering that in my embossing powder, and then I'm going to blast that with the heat again just to set it. Now colouring and cutting this out is going to be interesting because it's quite a random image, but there are also quite a lot of just loose lines on the edge, so it's going to be interesting to decide where to cut, where to leave, but I think I'll work that out. just cleaning everything up there, just cleaning my stamp. It's always good to clean as you go. Don't put them away dirty, because you'll find the ink will build up on them and you'll lose the depth and the precision of the stamp if you do that. So it's good practice, just clean them as you go along. Just keep a cloth on your table and a sprayer with water, and that will do the job. So there we go. So we've got our panel, which we're going to cut out, and we've also got our base image. So I decided to start with the cutting out because I don't like fussy cutting. I thought, well, let's do that first. So I'm just kind of going to work my way around the image. Some bits I'm going to chop off, and apologies, that's sort of slightly out of focus there, but this is obviously delicate work and you kind of need to be close, so not something I could do easily and hold it in front of the camera, but you can see for some sections I am. But I'm just having to work out really as I go around the edges which bits will work just using the bottom layer, which bits need to be coloured and be part of the layer that sits above. Now if there are things like berries in the background, you can see bottom right, I could have left those on the bottom layer, coloured them in on the bottom layer, and then just stuck that top bit on top. But I decided I was going to actually cut most of that out and colour it, so I kind of just worked my way around. Now fussy cutting, as I've said, I'm not good at. The bits I know about that people have told me is move the project, don't move the scissors. So get the scissors in a good angle. Find yourself a decent pair of scissors. You want a nice sharp pair of scissors. Most people work with small sets, but I have known some people who do fussy cutting with huge scissors, which bamboozles me because I could not do that. And just basically work your way around. It takes time. Patience, I think, is the main skill with fussy cutting. My friend Denise is brilliant at it. She sits there with a tray of an evening watching television doing it. I could not do that. There we go, just working my way around. Now this is the side, as I mentioned, with lots of kind of stray leading lines. So I decided to actually cut to the flower petals, leave those lines, and they can just sit on the layer underneath. So I'm just going to leave them underneath. Whether I need to colour that section underneath just to give it a little bit of colour rather than leaving it as kind of background remains to be seen, and that was a decision I made later on. So I'm cutting my way around, and you can see it doesn't actually take that long. It kind of feels worse than it is, but once you get going, it's okay. There we go, and those ones I did decide to chop off, so they will be on the layer underneath, I believe. There we go, and we're nearly done. Quite a relief when the fussy cutting is done. Lots of scraps of paper to get rid of, so the next thing to do really is to colour that. So you can see how it's going to sit on the project. I grabbed my Arteza pens, and I decided to go for a bluish, purplish, pinkish palette. I thought, well, I've stamped the actual image in blue, and I've got blue and green below, but I wanted a different colour, obviously something that was just going to lift it a little bit. So you can see I've pulled out there a couple of shades of purple and a blue. I'm using my water brush, and mostly I'm just putting some ink onto my acrylic block, and then I'm just laying down a thin layer on the leaves. Now I decided the leaves in the centre should be bright purple, the ones coming out from that should be the lighter purple, and then on the very outside, i.e. at the ends of the leaves, they should be a blue. I do not think there is a plant or flower in nature that has this colour scheme, but I just decided to go for it. This is a card for my goddaughter, and she will love those bright colours, so I decided to just go for it. So I've laid down that first layer of blue. Now this is so pale, and it's such a pale blue, if I need to go over the top of it with either of the purples, that will work anyway. So it doesn't really matter. Don't spend too much time agonising and thinking, where am I going to paint what colour? If you're working with a very pale colour like this, you can always go over the top of it and correct it anyway. So you'll see on some of these, I'm using that purple, but I'm actually going over the top of what I've painted in blue. It doesn't matter, it kind of gives it more depth, it gives it a slightly distinguished different colour, and you'll find that that will work okay on the finished project. So I'm just working my way around there colouring. I find colouring really relaxing. It's one part of card making that I really love, and I just really enjoy colouring. I enjoy making those choices, making the decisions around colour what where. And I just love the actual process as well, just the blending of the colours and just laying down the different sort of tones to make them work together. So I usually do sort of background, inner, centre. Well, if you work that model, you're less likely to make a mistake. If you start with something big and bold in the middle and then try and work your way out, once you've done big and bold, you can't usually go back. If you do it the way I do it, you start on the outside with the lightest colour, kind of work your way in. When you're making those big bold decisions, you've already got most of the project coloured. So that's, in my theory, kind of the best way to do it, because I think it removes the margin for error. it's more efficient, and by the time you then finish, you've coloured everything. So that's my theory, and I tend to work that way. So I've coloured the main thing. I'm now just working around doing bits and pieces like the berries on the edge. I'm going to give it all a dry with my heat tool, and then I'd naturally add a bit of highlighting as well, maybe some white. You can see there I decided to kind of darken some of the outer leaves just to give them a little bit more colour, so that they don't look quite so starkly different than the purples. And this is the thing, if you start with that lighter layer, you can always make those changes, you can add to it. It's very hard to take away, it's easier to add to. So I'm now just giving that another heat. But this is quite a nice image. It's quite hard to distinguish some of the leaves from which flower they belong to, but overall that doesn't really matter. I'm now going in with my white pen. This is just to give a bit of highlighting here and there. These are those basic jelly roll pens from Japan. I've got a white one and a silver one. They're both really useful for fine work. The only thing to watch out for is that the nibs do get clogged, so sometimes you do need to take them off and just give them a clean. I've only got a couple of leaves on here, so I've just given them a quick green, and then I think we're pretty much done on our central panel. Just looking at different leaves and thinking, could that be slightly darker, could that be slightly coloured? But there we go, that's pretty much our panel done. It didn't take that long overall, and ended up looking quite good. Now, I've got my stamping platform out again. We now need to stamp our sentiment. So this is the sentiment that actually came with the stamp set. It's quite a cute, simple one. It doesn't really stand out hugely from the background. Apologies, this is slightly off camera, but it doesn't really stand out enormously from the background, but I decided to go with it. It doesn't need to stand out hugely from the background because you will still see it. So I've just stamped it down the bottom there. Because the backing behind it is kind of patterned, it's got the different colours, it's not going to be hugely obvious, but once you see it, you'll see it. So that was absolutely fine. I could have stamped it on a separate piece of card and stuck it to the front and mounted it, and I dare say that would have looked nice as well, but I just decided to stamp it. And there we go, so we've got our stamp and we've got our sentiment, sorry, so that's fine. I was going to use the sentiment that came with the stamp set, but it didn't quite fit, so I actually found another one that was just a similar message but slightly smaller in size. I'm using the same VersaFine clear just to go around the edges. I don't like leaving white edges typically, so I thought, yeah, I'm going to do something around the edges with this. I wanted to continue to use that same colour so that it all ties together. Next, I am colouring those gems and those beads that are hanging down. I'm assuming these are glass beads. They've all got a reflection built into the actual stamp, so it does tell you what to do and where to go. So I'm using that vibrant purple. You can see I'm just laying a bit of colour down on the right hand side, and then I'm pulling it out with my water brush so that we get texture and we get difference on the right hand side. Working my way across the page in a very nonsensical way because I started kind of in the middle and then had to lean on what I'd done to go to the left. Typically when you're doing something like this, you'd work left to right, so I should have really started on the left and worked my way across the right hand page. That looks nice. You can see the purple contrasts really nicely with the pale green and the pale blue in the back, and I was quite pleased with how this came out actually. I was careful, tried not to go over the highlighted bits on those gems hanging down, but I then went over them with the white pen anyway, so it kind of made it okay either way. There you go, and I'm just doing the one right on the very edge of the paper there. And you can see, just adding that little bit of purple, that little pop of colour in the main body, sort of brings the whole thing together. When I add the flowers, you can obviously see it all ties in together. So that's our background. That is me slightly off camera again, apologies for that. It is difficult with the light and the camera right in front of you to see sometimes, so you have to kind of do stuff right in front of you sometimes. But anyway, there you go, you can see I'm kind of just trying where that's going to go. Now at this point I did decide to address those lines that just go off the page. I just took some of the blue, the same blue as the berries, just edged that slightly. You can see I'm now going to stick down that panel, so I'm just giving a little glue all over there, just basic PVA glue that I've put in a little pinpoint bottle, so I can do fine gluing. I'm then using my smoothie with the same blue ink on just to go around that, just to make sure we haven't got any harsh stark white edges there. Just noticing there are a couple of bits I've missed, and then I'm using a scrap bit of paper just to press the whole thing down. It's good to use scrap because just if you do it with your hand you might have grease or some residue of another colour on there, and then you find you've got a stray colour there that shouldn't be there. Just giving that a good old press. There we go, there's our main body of card done. And what I'm doing now, I'm using the same white pen just to go over the gems and just highlight those white bits in white, just to make sure they're absolutely white and crisp and clean, because they obviously would have had the backing behind them, the pale green and blue. So just by colouring them in white, it just really cements them, makes them really noticeable, and it sort of neutralises the background effect with the white as well. And there you go, you can see we've done that. So now it's a case of, what else do we need to do? We need to back the card, and we need to obviously mount it onto a card blank. They're the two key things left we need to do. Just more highlights, just more tidying up. The white on the blue took a few goes because obviously the blue was quite deep. But once you've laid one bit down, you can then add another layer on top, and you'll find the more you add, the more dense the white becomes, and then eventually it sort of gets to the level you need it. Now, I looked at this piece of paper I had. It was a kind of a blue, I think it was a sprayed background actually, but I decided I was going to cut it out, and then I was going to use the same blue to go around the edge. I wanted to keep it all in the same tone, and this blue background was quite light, so I decided no, I'm not going to use that. So this was a layer I cut down, and then I decided to use the pad, and you can see I just go along the edge with the pad and just actually darken the edge. You're only going to see a tiny little bit of it, so you only need to do a tiny little bit of it. Save your ink. But again, it's just another way of using your ink, using your existing supplies rather than reaching for and trying to find a bit of blue paper that matches the colour. Use the actual colour. So you can see there, I'm just checking that that fits, and obviously the piece of paper, one or the other wasn't exactly perfectly square, so it took a few little goes working around to suss out which way round it needed to go. Once I got it into a place where I could get an even border all the way around, flipped it over, and then I used glue to actually stick it down. That way I get a little bit of a woggle as well, in case I need to sort of wobble it around. There we go, so there's sticking it down, and you can see you get a little bit of wiggle room, which is quite good. I'm giving it just a good press there. There we go, so that's our main panel, which is good. At this point I'm grabbing a 6-inch card blank. I'm going to just obviously fold that with my bone folder and stick the whole thing down. And for this I use double-sided and the bunny ears technique, so that I can again give it a little wiggle if I need to. There we go. And then when I'm happy with that, I'll pull the tapes obviously and stick the sides down. And there's our project. Now the last touch I added some glossy accents to all of those gems. Just by doing that, it just brings them to life, gives them a kind of a really lovely glossy shine. You have to wait for it to dry properly, but I mean that does happen fairly quickly, and you need to put it on the side for like an hour. But it does just bring that to life. So it's a little thing to do, and it does make a difference. If you do it on eyes, on animals and people, you'll find it really does bring them to life. Just have to be a little bit patient while it dries. So there's our project. You can see obviously we've used the stamp. It's a whole image stamp, but by decoupaging and colouring the floral bit, it added interest. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and maybe like and subscribe to my channel to get notified of future videos. Thanks for watching.